All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Philadelphia Eagles matchup and the absolutely just debacle of officiating that we saw Sunday afternoon. And we're going to break down three just horrendous examples. There's a lot of chatter of what went so horrifically wrong. This was probably one of the worst officiated games all season long that we've seen. And there are three key instances where the officials somehow just absolutely screwed it up more than anything else. These aren't judgment calls or just a bad call. These are just debacles and officiating. We'll break all three of them down. Before we get into it, I want to be very clear. We do a number of these officiating reviews. Neither of us are Steelers fans or Eagles fans. My co-host Mize, he's a Ravens fan. He hates the Steelers. He doesn't want to see the Steelers have any sort of positivity here. But we're going to break down what's going on in this officiating because it is hurting the game regardless of your fandom. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring up our first example, and that was the roughing the long snapper, the unnecessary roughness penalty that gave the Philadelphia Eagles a first down after a field goal attempt early in the game. We've got our image here, and this is just an example, or not an example, excuse me, but this was what was called, this up-close screenshot here, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can see the long snapper with two Pittsburgh Steelers on other side of him in each of the A-gaps, kind of getting blocked into him, kind of a mess there. The refs decide to throw the flag here. What's so egregious about this is a very, very tame example of contact on the long snapper. Usually the penalty of unnecessary roughness on the snapper is because the snapper has his head down, forcible contact, right? He's unprotected. They also don't want someone to get like a running shot and just blow him up and cause harm for no reason. So if the players, the people rushing the field goal, both these A-gap defenders in this case, if they get blocked into him or if they make an effort to not hit him dead on or with forcible contact, the refs never call it. And then example of this, let's go to our next picture here. This is a very common example of a field goal block. This is from the Bears-Packers game earlier this season. You can see the Packers are literally on top of the long snapper right there. The refs don't throw a flag there because it wasn't aggressive, forcible, unnecessary roughness on the snapper there. They're just trying to work through the gaps as they're getting blocked. This was a terrible call against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an example of a referee trying to take over the game, calling a penalty that's never called. First disaster this game against the Steelers.
Yeah, Nick, and I think my big question here, and maybe you clarify this for me, is when you see stuff like this, it's a lot of the times this penalty, and why it's probably not called, is the intention behind it. Yeah. Is it intentionally a guy, aggressing the center when the center's head down and they're defenseless at that point? Or as we've seen in these pictures, it's more so looking like that this is along the lines of, like you said, it's so hard in this field goal block situation to kind of keep from touching more than one person at the same time. Everyone's so close together where if you're trying to block your guy, if you get blocked down just a little bit, you're going to be on top of the center. It's almost inevitable at some points.
Yeah, absolutely correct there. Unnecessary roughness definitionally is player safety, right? Like when you hit a player out of bounds or, after the play's over, it's a player safety issue. That's why the foul is 15 yards against your team if you commit the foul. Here's an example where there was no intent. They were actually blocked in a long snapper. Absolutely terrible call. But unfortunately for the Steelers, this was just one of three disasters. Let's go ahead and pull up the second one. This was late in the game, fourth quarter time frame. The Steelers are set to punt. You can see right here the Steelers, the punt is on. You can see the punter right there on the leftish side of the screenshot here. The ball is just off his foot. He just got punted. In the middle of the screen, you can see Philadelphia Eagle Jalen Carter punching a Pittsburgh Steeler during a play. That is an example of unnecessary roughness. That's a player safety issue. Obviously, you can't punch another player. What was interesting here is that the referees decided this was almost an after the change of possession penalty. They awarded the Philadelphia Eagles the football and just backed up half the distance to the goal and gave the Eagles the possession. They were backed up at this point. But if you go to the NFL rulebook, and that's the next image here, this is literally Article 3, change of possession. And I'll read it from you, even though you guys can read it on the screen. It says, a change of possession occurs when a player of the defensive team secures possession of a ball that has been kicked, passed, or fumbled by a player on the offensive team, or when the ball is awarded to the opposing team by rule. A change of possession includes, but it's not limited to, and I'm going to skip to the important part here, a catch or recovery of a scrimmage kick. As you can see by the screenshot, there was no catch. There was no recovery. Now, a lot of times in these instances, referees give a little bit of leeway, right? If it's close to being a catch or if it's close to being recovered, they'll call it a change of possession. That's not even close. Best case scenario here is that the ball just got kicked. The ball is in the air. Once the ball's in the air, things like defensive holding and defensive pass interference obviously go away, but that wasn't the call on the field. It was unnecessary roughness. This is a blown call. It should have been Steelers ball, 1st and 10, plus 15 yards. Another just disaster in officiating here.
Yeah, Nick, and I think for me here, again, the main issue is, like you said, the timing of everything. When the call was called, you can see when the punch occurred. It was so early on in the play, and I think the point you're getting to, if you look at the screenshot that we had earlier in the video, the ball literally is inches away from the guy's foot. It has not really even left the Steelers' line of scrimmage. It has not passed the line of scrimmage, so obviously nobody caught the ball, so it hasn't been a change of possession, and that way they call the penalty for the Steelers. Steelers probably getting first down, continuing going forward. Again, just it seems to me like this was just a blown call in the fact of they called the right call, but it was the timing of when they called the call which was so bad.
Yeah, and it's just a communication error too, right? You see the refs huddle after a foul is called. I guarantee you one of the refs should have asked, hey, was the ball in the air? Had the ball been, past the line of scrimmage when the foul occurred? I'm guessing that didn't occur because any ref throwing that flag would have said, yeah, that was 2 steps into the play. So the ball had not been recovered. There was not a change of possession. For whatever reason, that communication didn't occur, and it worked against the Steelers. Debacle number 2 against Pittsburgh. But let's go into our third officiating disaster. And this is, of course, the fight that occurred earlier in the game in the first half after the Steelers recovered a muff punt. The Steelers got a play down inside the 5, a Najee Harris touch. They called it a penalty, unnecessary roughness on the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 fouls on the Steelers, responding really to Philadelphia Eagles punches after Darnell Washington had a really dominating block against the Eagles DB. I believe it was Jenkins, number 27. What was interesting is that after the game, even though there was clear evidence of the Eagles throwing punches, the referee said there was no evidence. Let's go ahead and pull up the tweet here, right here. This is from Nick Farabaugh, and he said the officials were asked why no fouls were called on the Eagles during the scuffle in the first quarter. Referee Alan X says no punches were observed on the field, and that it gave New York time to review the play where there were no video evidence of Eagles throwing punches. So that no video evidence is really important, right? Obviously, the refs on the field, you can miss it. Things happen. We hate it, but they're human beings. They can miss things happening. But that second statement is really critical. No video evidence means we let New York watch all the angles, watch all the footage, and say there's no evidence at all that a punch was thrown. We can't see any indication at all that a Philadelphia Eagle even thought about throwing a punch. Yet when you go to the literal broadcast footage, and we got a few screenshots here, this first one shows 27 Mitchell, not Jenkins. I said Jenkins, but his name his name's Mitchell. Excuse me. He's actually rearing back to begin to punch. That's evidence right there. And if you go to the next screenshot, you can see the top of his hand on top of the Pittsburgh Steeler. I believe that's Calvin Austin right there. He is actually getting punched. So this is literally from the broadcast footage, video evidence of the Eagles throwing punches. Now, again, I'm not blaming the officials for missing the call on the field. I am blaming whoever the official is, the communication with New York, for saying there is no evidence that the Eagles threw punches. There were obviously video evidence that the Eagles were throwing punches. This should have been offsetting fouls at absolute worst, with 27 getting an ejection for throwing a punch. Again, this is a communication debacle. I'm okay with officials missing calls. It happens. But as we've seen through all these 3 plays, we got officials that don't know when the change of possession occurs. They aren't following the rules. They're not communicating. They're calling fouls and not calling fouls when they shouldn't. This was just a disaster and probably the worst officiating game I saw all season long.
Yeah, Nick, and I think the last one is just clearly the issue here for me is that they clearly are just trying to get by. It was a poorly officiated game. There's multiple mistakes, and they're trying to, blow off the issue here on one person saying this, one person saying this. They're saying, hey, we just didn't have enough evidence to continue make the call here. And clearly, anyone watching the game, I think this is why sometimes the fans at home get so upset, because they see the replay, they see the angles, they see what comes across the TV screen. Like, hey, it's right there. But sometimes you wonder, what exactly are they looking at? Because if you were to watch the broadcast and you saw the angle as we showed here, it's pretty clear that some evidence, you could argue, okay, was it a punch? What was it? There's at least evidence that there was a punch thrown. In the wording, they say that there was no evidence a punch was thrown. I think that is the worst part here for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's not like they said, we couldn't get a clear visual of a punch. They said there was no video evidence, and that just loses all faith in officiating. This is something, obviously, this was a huge game between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Playoff implications, division titles, seeding. This will affect the season. This will affect the Super Bowl outcome this season, and we'll see other officiating issues the rest of the year. We've seen a number of them. We've covered them. The NFL has a serious problem on its hands, and this latest Steelers-Eagles matchup is just the latest example.